Hi, I'm Kristen Goodwin. On this episode of the Fox News Rundown, journalists continue to deliver the hard-hitting headlines during unprecedented times. Bill Hemmer, host of Bill Hemmer Reports on the Fox News Channel and the podcast Hemmer Time, joins host Jessica Rosenthal to discuss what it's been like covering the coronavirus pandemic, an economic crisis, and a contentious presidential election. He also weighs in on why he is optimistic about America's future. Restaurants and bars are among the hardest hit businesses amid the outbreak. Liliana Lovell, founder of the famed Coyote Ugly Saloon in New York City, joins host Chris Foster to discuss why some of her venues might not recover. Plus commentary from Fox News contributor Kat Timpf. The Fox News Rundown is a daily news podcast where we take a deeper look at the stories important to you. You can subscribe on your favorite podcast player by going to foxnewspodcasts.com.
Geraldo Rivera.
I'm Emily Campagno.
And I'm Eric Shawn. This is a Fox News Rundown.
Wednesday, May 20th, 2020. I'm Jessica Rosenthal. Things may be different for a while thanks to this virus, but some see better days ahead, especially now that we've been tested.
I think if there is another wave or two or three, I think we are much better prepared than anyone could have suggested in the first week of March.
I'm Chris Foster. Coyote Ugly Saloon owner Liliana Lovell says some of her bars might not survive the coronavirus outbreak.
This has been very difficult. Bars that were successful may not reopen because we haven't come to terms with the entities that hold our leases, and this is a lot to handle.
And I'm Kat Timpf. I've got the final word on the Fox News Rundown.
As people wait to go back to work and hope there are jobs to go back to, President Trump indicated that's a priority.
Because with millions of Americans forced out of work by the virus, it's more important than ever to remove burdens that destroy American jobs. In a few minutes, I will sign an executive order instructing federal agencies to use any and all authority to waive, suspend, and eliminate unnecessary regulations that impede economic recovery.
He said he was disappointed in China, but said it just proves his long-standing insistence on the importance of bringing supply chains back to the U.S.
It's a disgrace. Could have been stopped at the source, but they decided not to do that. But we're going to safely reopen our country and our economy, and it's happening very rapidly.
He said states like Florida and Georgia are reopening without a spike in virus cases. However, parts of Texas, North Carolina, and Arizona have seen increases. Meanwhile, the financial attempts to prop up the economy through the pandemic were questioned by the Senate Banking Committee this week. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin testified about the money meant to help families and businesses so far. There have been snafus with programs like the Paycheck Protection Plan. Larger companies getting money they ended up giving back, and smaller businesses not getting much of anything.
We've issued more than 140 million economic impact payments for over $240 billion to provide direct relief to millions of Americans. The typical family of four received approximately $3,400.
But he said if states don't start reopening, there could be permanent damage to the economy. Mnuchin rejected criticism from Senator Elizabeth Warren that he's propping up Wall Street by failing to force larger companies to hire all of their employees back. Both he and Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell defended the spending so far. While Mnuchin leans toward a pause in spending, Powell says more stimulus may be needed.
This reversal of economic fortune has caused a level of pain that is hard to capture in words, as lives are upended amid great uncertainty about the future. The Federal Reserve is committed to using our full range of tools to support the economy in this challenging time.
But will it be enough to prevent a catastrophic 25% unemployment rate? As people in nursing homes or with underlying health conditions fear the virus, many younger, healthier folks are fearing their bank accounts. The pain is everywhere.
Today is the first day that I feel actually somewhat normal. Going back to March. That's what I would say.
He is the host of Bill Hemmer Reports and the Hemmer Time podcast.
You have to remember, I cracked my fibula a couple months ago on Easter Saturday. So I've been going through Corona with a broken ankle. And that feels better now. The weather has turned here in the Northeast. I think that has an effect. And I think really on the numbers, we have had our lowest death count for 2 or 3 days running now across the country, and I think that is a very good sign. When you start to look at deaths, we'll keep an eye on it. Hopefully it stays low that way and it does not spike. But deaths and hospitalizations are the numbers you have to keep an eye on.
And some of the numbers people are keeping an eye on are, economic numbers. We heard this week, Fed Chairman Jerome Powell told the Senate Banking Committee that while everyone did what they did to stay home, to try to save lives, the economic impacts hit those hardest who were least able to bear them. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin testified he sees good economic indicators on the horizon, and he's echoing what the president has said, that we're going to have a tremendous year next year. Is that overly optimistic?
I'm not sure how this all pans out, to be frank with you. My sense is that everyone's guessing. I'll give you anecdotally an example. I've been on the phone with Delta Airlines for a couple of weeks, just trying to figure out where they operate and when, and it has been stubborn. And what that tells me is that the demand for flying is just not there. That's one data point. With regard to the overall economy, I think the market is reacting in a way that most people did not expect. The S&P and the NASDAQ were about where they were before all this happened. And I think that has been confounding to many. What I sense is that investors believe the comeback could happen sooner rather than later. I'm not saying they're right, but I think they're betting on that. I would also add that between Mnuchin and Jerome Powell, the Fed chair, they have put so much money into the system. It is bound to have an effect. With regard to Congress and whether or not they make another move, I don't think you can expect that well into June, if at all, pending how this recovery goes.
Back to the Senate Banking Committee for a second. One of the senators, asked at one point, how many people will die as we send people back to work? And it's that tension between, like, if you want the economy to open, then you're okay with people dying. And if you're not okay with it, then you're okay with people not having work and not being able to pay their bills. It's like this unfair choice, right? And we keep hearing that discussion, but where should we be? Where do you think we are? Is it, look, you have to weigh the risk for yourself, and we just need to go back out there and sort of lock away the nursing homes and the senior care facilities and hope for the best? Or
here's my feeling, and it's a very interesting question. Here's what I would say. I think we know so much more now than we did 60 days ago. I think if there is another wave or 2 or 3, I think we are much better prepared than anyone could have suggested in the first week of March. Jessica, unfortunately, I've been in New York City this entire time. I have not traveled. I have barely left the city, sometimes out to Long Island, but maybe for a day or two. I would very much enjoy the opportunity to get out and see what's happening in Dallas, what's happening in Columbus, Ohio, what's going on in Denver, Colorado, because I don't get a good sense of it. But I do believe this. Anytime someone sneezes in New York City, people give them a double take. Anytime someone even feels as if they're running a fever, 99 degrees, then there's a rule: you don't go to work. And we can operate under those guidelines and prevent another massive wave from coming back here and knocking us off our feet again. I am optimistic in that we are much better prepared to handle this than we could have ever guessed 2 months ago.
Well, that's great. I want to pivot for a second, because you pivoted right quick last week. You went from the virus to politics when the Michael Flynn unmasking story broke. And I know those pivots are extreme and difficult. Where does this story sort of end up in your mind? We know Attorney General Barr reminded us of Connecticut Attorney General John Durham's investigation into the origins of the Russia investigation, right? And criminal charges could come from that. Yeah. But Barr also said former President Obama and Vice President Joe Biden are not a part of a criminal investigation. The president, as we know, has since said he was surprised by that. Does this just become a talking point now used to put Biden on defense? Where does this go?
I think I expected I didn't expect the announcement, but I wasn't surprised by the statement with regard to former President Obama and former Vice President Joe Biden. I have always been dubious as to whether or not any of this would lead to a criminal prosecution. I could be wrong, but I do believe, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm not trained in it, but I think the law has to show intent. And if you could do that, you could proceed with the prosecution and probably find a way to be successful in it. I am not and have not been convinced that that is the course that the government will take. And I have felt this way since I went to El Salvador a year ago for Bill Barr's first interview, when I talked to him then about what he was looking at and what he was trying to uncover, and how he talked about things don't hang together. I took the job, I started asking questions, and the answers I was getting back were not satisfactory. Okay, maybe Durham does find a way to prosecute that, but ever since that trip and just listening to the language and the answers he gave, I have not been convinced that anyone will be prosecuted.
Okay, back to something COVID related, Bill. I want to ask you about China. Things seem to be getting more intense, both. Chinese officials are basically accusing us of overreacting. The World Health Organization is on defense. Our president is threatening the funding that we give them, and he's written a letter to the WHO about that. And China's calling that letter a smear. Are we going to be talking about China for a long time to come?
I do believe the answer is yes, and I'm not so sure about the future for the World Health Organization. I believe it'll stay intact ultimately. I think you have to negotiate a stronger position where you can exact something for the money that you're paying. And if indeed the United States is giving the substantial amounts of payments to the World Health Organization, we should get changes for that. And how you shape that is something that leaders in our government need to figure out. But I do believe the relationship with the World Health Organization has changed. I believe the relationship between the United States and China has now, on behalf of both sides, we are seeing each other as competitors with one another. After decades in which the Chinese, they built their economy in a different way. And, 1.2, 1.3 billion people. It was 20 or 30 years ago when I was in Shanghai or Beijing, and we were talking about a third world country. And then it moved to an emerging market. And they have a massive middle class that continues to grow, and they will have their own demands on their own government to make sure that they can have jobs. But I think the United States and China have reached the point where they are competitors for decades to come in every category.
Yeah, it certainly feels adversarial, and the president says China is responsible here with this virus and needs to be held responsible. What does that look like? I know some senators want us to be able to sue China. I'm not sure if that's going to be allowed, but what in your mind does holding them responsible look like?
I think a lot of people, frankly, are upset the way this relationship has gone with the outbreak of the coronavirus, and rightly so. How that relationship develops and unfolds is something I do not know. I think for some time it could be adversarial. That was the word you used, and I don't think it'll stay that way. I think what you'll find is a competition for ideas between two countries and two economies that will fight on their own turf to see whether or not their policies succeed or fail in the international community.
Yeah, and exactly who dominates, right? Bill, one last one. In 10 years, are we going to look back on this and think the virus itself was the big story, or the economic impact of it was?
I've put this over the past 20 years in the categories of the election recount of 2000 in Tallahassee, of 9/11 here in September of 2001, of Katrina in New Orleans, of the financial wreck of 08 and 09. And I'm starting to think that this is bigger than all of them in ways that so many people could not predict, and not just for the United States, but countries all over the world. If your question is asking me choose A or B, today I'm choosing B, because this is going to remake industries forever in ways that we cannot predict.
Wow. Bill Hemmer, thank you so much for your time.
Good to be with you, Jessica.
This is Kat Timpf with your Fox News commentary. Coming up.
There aren't many bars open in America, only in a few states, including Texas this coming weekend, but only at 25% capacity. Governor Greg Abbott says,
"Our focus is to keep you safe while also restoring your ability to get back to work, to open your businesses, to pay your bills, to put food on your tables."
Liliana Lovell owns 2 bars in Texas, part of her worldwide Coyote Ugly Saloon empire. She opened her first little country bar in New York City in 1993. An article led to a movie and then openings around the world, with all-female bartenders known as coyotes showing some skin, dancing on the bar, and sometimes good-naturedly abusing the clientele.
Pre-COVID, we had 28. Now post-COVID, or during the pandemic, we have 26. It's been very interesting. Today I got an email from our UK franchisee, and they don't think they'll be opening until July or September.
Wow.
So they're having some of the same struggles. So, they've also received their loans, but again, with the way that they're structuring the social distancing openings and the occupancies, they're struggling because they have big places and they don't know if they'd be able to maintain all their financial responsibilities on with such a small footprint on opening.
Yeah, that's the thing. If you've got a place that is designed and budgeted for, what's your biggest? What capacity?
Well, I would say the UK bars are the biggest. So Cardiff, probably somewhere around 15 to 20,000 square feet. So to give you an idea, New York is about 1,000 square feet.
So I mean, right? But if you run your numbers at X number of customers over the course of a week or a month, and then that's suddenly artificially cut in a quarter, cut to a quarter or a half, can you make your nut? Are there going to be bars that it's just not going to be profitable, even when you're allowed to open?
I mean, we're dealing with this the last few days. So there's a few states that are relaxing some of the openings, and we could possibly open up this weekend in
which one?
In Oklahoma City and in Austin, Texas. So in Oklahoma, it's actually a little bit more relaxed. So I think we probably will open there, but Austin is at 25%. I don't see how we could open and it not cost us money to be open.
Well, and part of your hook, I know that some of your places actually have sit-down restaurants, but part of your hook is that that the bars sell themselves as rowdy and fun and bartenders in people's faces. Have you talked about how you're going to deal with changing? You're going to change the brand a little bit.
Yes, absolutely. So it's something that we talk about on conference calls every day, essentially, because we're changing the social dynamic that was part of our brand. I can't even answer with none being open right now. I can't really answer how exactly the vibe of Coyote is going to change because we're not open. But we've had to create new policies, new procedures. I mean, this has been a lot of work to make sure that we're keeping on top of all the state regulations and, trying to be safer on our employees and our customers. This is a lot. It's a lot to handle.
The company took out coronavirus relief loans as part of the CARES Act passed by Congress, but then laid off all its managers, and one complained to the press. Jeff Wiseman is Coyote Ugly's general counsel.
We got our first loan, I think, April 15th, and within 8 weeks, you've got to use the money up. And we can't even open in any place. So we've got 4 weeks to open, but we don't even have an announced date from state governments to open anywhere. So, and then if you use all the money, and you're not open, and then you try and open with no money, you're going to go out of business, and then the loan becomes non-forgivable because you've closed. The terms need to be reworked. You should be able to use the money for any business purpose. It shouldn't have to be 75% payroll, or you should be able to use it over a longer term. Why does it have to be used in 8 weeks from disbursement? We can't even open, so it makes no sense.
Basically, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin said at this meeting with the restaurant people that he understands and that he thinks it's just a technical fix, that maybe that can be worked out. So there may be hope on the horizon there. Lil, I see you guys are selling.
You know what? I think that, another thing that people don't understand. So, and I understand that, there's a different mindset with business owners versus employees. So as a business owner, we have a lot of responsibilities, and we only have one space in the States that is owned and operated. Yeah, I'm the landlord of the New Orleans building where the New Orleans bar is at. The rest are leased from other people, other entities. So people have this idea that when we were closed, that was it. You don't owe rent. That your bills have stopped, and that's just not the case. So this has been very difficult. Bars that were successful may not reopen because we haven't come to terms with the entities that hold our leases, and this is a lot to handle.
It's a couple dozen landlords that you've got to work with.
Yes.
Yeah, and they all want to be paid. Imagine that.
Well, of course, some of them can probably sit on it for a while, and some of them probably can't. Because everybody up and down the chain, the people you're paying up and the people you're paying down, they've all got bills to pay.
Yeah, we have to do what's in the best interests of Coyote Ugly at each location, because they're each separate LLCs. So it's been Jeff has really been doing a lot of work to just communicate, and the reality of opening up at less than 100% occupancy is obviously not optimum for success. So this has been a lot.
I see you've been selling tickets to reopening parties, hopefully when the day comes.
We sold like 10. Oh. We literally sold like 10. So what's funny is we got slammed in this Texas paper.
Okay.
They've been, selling it. Like we sold 10, and I think we sold maybe like 20 or 30. We made these little gym towels that say, Coyote Ugly, spread joy, not germs. I think we sold maybe 20 or 30 of those.
I set foot in your place in New York not long after you opened it. It was 27 years ago. What, do you remember the day?
Yeah, January 27, 1993.
Okay, well, sometime not long after that, I walked into your bar, for better or worse, and I've known you for an awful long time. Jeff, I've known you for an awful long time, and I really hope that this all works out.
I think that, we're starting to ramp up. We're hoping that Oklahoma opens up this weekend, and so it was very nice to feel some energy, some positive energy coming out. But yes, we are hoping that they change the wording on some of these loans, and that it's more beneficial for us to open up and not feel so much debt.
Well, keep your guys and girls safe, and
yes, absolutely.
Keep your customers happy.
And hopefully I'll see you at the New York bar in January.
I hope so. And we're coming up on 20 years since the movie came out, by the way, which was a little shocking to me.
Oh, that's right. It is, because my son's 20 and he was about 8 or 9 months old when I went to the premiere. That's right. God.
Liliana Lovell is the Coyote Ugly founder and CEO. Jeff Wiseman, her the Robin to her Batman, as the company's general counsel. Jeff, Lil, it was good to talk to you. Good luck, guys.
Okay, nice talking to you.
Talk to you soon.
Download Fox News Channel's The 5 podcast for free. 5 of your favorite Fox News personalities discuss current issues in a roundtable discussion. Get it now on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and foxnewspodcasts.com. Rate and review the Fox News Rundown on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen.
It's time for your Fox News commentary. Cat Temp. What's on your mind?
More than 200 celebrities, scientists, and Nobel Prize winners have signed an open letter rejecting the idea that things should, quote, go back to normal after the coronavirus pandemic ends, arguing that we must instead stop, quote, the pursuit of consumerism. Now, to be clear, I'm not attacking them for their success or even for them enjoying it with lavish lifestyles. What I am saying, however, is that I can't help but be irked by the lack of awareness that you'd have to have in order to sign something like this while you're sitting in an extravagant home. After all, if any of the super wealthy people who signed the letter had any real interest in stopping the pursuit of consumerism, they would certainly have started with taking a look at their own habits in that area. A letter recently published in the French publication Le Monde states in part, the pursuit of consumerism and an obsession with productivity have led us to deny the value of life itself, that of plants, that of animals, and that of a great number of human beings. Pollution, climate change, and the destruction of our remaining natural zones has brought the world to a breaking point. Many of these people, such as Madonna, Robert De Niro, Iggy Pop, Christian Louboutin, Penelope Cruz, and Jane Fonda, to name a few, are incredibly rich and famous. Madonna, for example, is actually totally free to sell her multi-million-dollar mansion and give all the cash to Greenpeace if she wanted to. No one is stopping her. And actually, with a net worth that Forbes estimates at $570 million in 2019, she could probably part with a lot of her assets and still live far more comfortably than the vast, vast majority of us could ever imagine. I'm not singling out Madonna either, because there were a lot of people on that list who probably haven't exactly had to resort to eating boxed macaroni and cheese in a while. Celebrity net worth, for example, estimates Jane Fonda's at about $200 million. Oh, and Robert De Niro, a cool $500 million. Perhaps what's most insane of all is the fact that Christian Louboutin signed this letter, but it's public knowledge that the most basic pair of heels he sells are about $700. Louboutin doesn't hate consumerism, he lives and breathes it. Obsession with material status symbols isn't just acceptable to him, it's actually his entire business model. It's the entire reason why he, the child of a cabinet maker and stay-at-home mother, was able to launch a business that made him worth an estimated $85 million today. The thing is, I actually think stories like his are amazing. I'm not attacking any of these people for having success or money. Far from it. Madonna's worth hundreds of millions of bucks, but she's also worked very hard and is incredibly talented. I'm serious. It's hard to believe that Like a Prayer came out more than 30 years ago because it still gets me on my feet anytime I hear it. No, their money doesn't bother me, and neither does their fame. What does bother me, though, is the hypocritical virtue signaling they all displayed in signing something like this. In fact, it's hard to see it as anything other than an insult to the intelligence of the rest of us. After all, we're not stupid, and we know these people aren't schlepping it. We know that Penelope Cruz, for example, is in fact not sleeping on a bale of hay in an abandoned barn somewhere. And we also know that both capitalism and her devotion to productivity are two major reasons why. If you're rich and you're famous, go ahead and live like you are. You've earned it. But please at least respect the rest of us. Do not pretend that you're devoted to minimalist living. After all, if you really were, you'd start by trying it yourself. I'm Kat Tim.
You've been listening to the Fox News Rundown. Stay up to date by subscribing to this podcast at foxnewspodcasts.com. And for up-to-the-minute news, go to foxnews.com.
Love Fox News? Click the subscribe button to get more of the news and opinion you trust, and click the Fox News Rundown playlist for the latest episodes.